Welcome to another edition of Courtside with Rob and Washut. But before we head over to the arena, I want to give a big thank you to our sponsors of the show, Group Therapy Bike Tours and Slim Chickens. We'll start with Group Therapy. They are all in on the Nebraska basketball wave. Head over to grouptherapybiketours.com and book your ride today for all of your pregame, post-game, whenever game, birthday party, wedding, family reunion, corporate event. They have a 15-person trolley ride, a 6-person mini bike for whatever event you want to celebrate. And like I said, it is full force in Nebraska. If you've gone to a Nebraska game, I'm sure you've seen the trolleys riding around the Haymarket and downtown Lincoln. If you go over to grouptherapybiketours.com and use the promo code NebraskaBall, you will save 15% on your first ride. So make sure you head on over there and support our great sponsor. It's a ton of fun. I've been on it several times. Could not recommend it enough. Now over to our other sponsors, Slim Chickens. Bill Hooks and his wife Stacy are diehard Nebraska fans, and they couldn't wait to jump on the Nebraska basketball train. Locally owned Slim Chickens has 2 locations, 84th and Old Cheney and 16th and Pine Lake. Slim Chickens features a variety of options with fried and grilled chicken tenders, wings, salads, wraps, sandwiches, chicken and waffles, and southern sides. What makes Slim's different? Well, they have over 17 different dipping sauces for guests to choose their favorite. Slim Chickens is available for dine-in, drive-through, or delivery via their online ordering. Check out Slim Chickens app and start earning rewards today. Slim Chickens is always a favorite for large gatherings and tailgate parties, especially Nebraska basketball tailgate parties, and let them do the cooking for you. Slim Chickens is moving forward, and they are expanding to the north side of Lincoln soon, so keep an eye out for that. Stop into your local Slim Chickens restaurant today for some southern hospitality and see their newly remodeled locations. Again, thanks to all our sponsors. Now let's head over to the arena and take you courtside with me, Rob and Washut.
Welcome to another edition of Courtside with Rob and Washut, and this is our last pregame analysis at home of the 2025-26 season. It is senior day here at PBA. Going to be an emotional one for a lot of different reasons. I guess obviously first and foremost, 5 of Nebraska's 7 seniors are going to be honored pregame. The only ones that aren't are Connor Esesian, who already is planning on coming back with a medical hardship waiver, and then Ugi Yarosevicius, who his future is kind of to be determined at this point. Asked Fred Hoiberg yesterday kind of if there's any update on him, just because he wasn't walking during the ceremony today. And he said nothing will be decided until after the season, but he would assume, quote unquote, that they will pursue a hardship waiver for Ugi. So kind of some interesting news there where there's a lot of uncertainty about his future there. But those guys we'll worry about after the season. For today is all about the 5 guys that are walking. Kendall Blue and Jared Garcia are going to cap off their lone years as Huskers. But the big kind of spotlight is going to be on the 3 big ones. Rink Mast, Jamarques Lawrence, and Sam Hoiberg, all playing their final game here. And it's a really interesting trio in the sense that all 3 have meant so much to this program over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and have all kind of journeyed their own path. And it's really a fascinating path for all 3 of them. I guess we'll start with Jamarques. He's a guy that came here out of high school, recruit out of Roselle Catholic, was close with C.J. Wilcher, followed him to Lincoln, and played right away as a freshman. Goes towards the back half of his freshman year. He was playing significant minutes due to injury and was kind of coming into form, and he kind of took that next step into his sophomore year by being a really integral piece to that NCAA tournament team, and ended up starting the majority of the season. And so when you look ahead after that year, going into 24-25, Fred Hoiberg had big plans for Jamarques. He was going to be his lead point guard and really kind of build the roster around that. Well, Jamarques decided to kind of explore his options, enter the transfer portal, and wound up at Rhode Island. And it was a learning year for Jamarques in a lot of ways, where he kind of saw that the grass isn't always greener, but at the same time he doesn't regret that decision. In fact, I think that he kind of values it for what he learned and how he grew both as a basketball player and as a person over that season with the Rams. He played a lot, got some good experience, but I think just his development as a leader and, just kind of gaining a new appreciation for the opportunity he had at Nebraska, I think was an invaluable experience for him. And so, going back to last spring, Nebraska's out in the college basketball crown in Las Vegas, and Jamarques hits the portal, and it was kind of a no-brainer situation. Nebraska was would welcome him back with open arms. He loved his experience here, and kind of, I think, realized that maybe he might have made a bit of a mistake, maybe not mistake, a rash decision in leaving. And so, in this portal world where rosters change by the month, by the day in some cases, second chances don't always happen. And this is one of those situations where bringing Jamarques back and Jamarques coming back made all the sense in the world for both parties. And so he came back, and he came back to Lincoln as a different player, a different person, a different leader. And he's gone through his ups and downs this year, just like everybody else. But he has been such a critical fixture in that backcourt and in this rotation, and then is in that locker room for helping take this culture and really just the cohesiveness of this team to the next level. So it's going to be a great send-off for Jamarques, especially for a guy that, I think has a greater appreciation for all that Nebraska provided him and the opportunities it offered, and one that, he'll look back on as this being probably one of his most treasured years of his basketball career. Next up, Rink Mast. What more can you say about a guy that has been kind of one of the faces of the program over the last 3 years? When he transferred from Bradley before that 23-24 tournament season, I don't know if anybody realized just like what he could be in Fred Hoiberg's offense, but it didn't take long to realize that he was almost a prototypical stretch five that, with his three-point shooting and his ability to pass, really took this system on offense to the next level. And he was such an integral part in that tournament run. Third team all-conference selection, played just really high-level basketball for most of the year. And what was especially impressive about that was the fact that towards probably, the last 2 or 3 months of the season, he was doing so on a bad knee. Go back to that win in Manhattan, Kansas in December of 2023, where Nebraska dominated Kansas State in Bramlage, and Rink, I think he had like 19 and 11 or something like that, and really had an excellent game. Well, the next day, he knew he had to have surgery, and it was one of those that he put off towards the end of the season, but as soon as the season came to an end, he had a kind of a decision to make of whether he was going to kind of just do a Band-Aid type fix where it would just let him play another year in 24-25, or do a more significant surgery that was going to hold him out for at least a year and be a long, arduous recovery that would really test his determination and kind of how much he really wanted this. And so he chose the latter option. He said, for my long-term health, let's get this thing as fixed as possible rather than just trying to stretch it out for another year and risk further damage. So because of that, last year was really hard for Rink. Not only just the injury and the recovery process, which was grueling in its own right, but then having to sit back and watch a real frustrating 24-25 season that it's impossible to think that if he wasn't available on that roster, Nebraska's not a tournament team. With Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary, Rink Mast, that was a pretty formidable group right there. And that team was already on the cusp of making the tournament. I think if they had Rink, they would have been a surefire team in the big dance, and who knows, maybe they would have already had that tournament win. So it was tough in the sense that Rink wanted to be out there, and he felt kind of limited in like what he could do to help his team, that kind of helpless feeling a little bit. So it was a real test of his physical toughness and mental toughness. But in the end, he stuck it out, and he did everything he was supposed to do every single day and got himself to the point where when they started summer workouts again, he was slowly but surely getting back to the player he was before the surgery. And, Rink's another guy, just like everybody, that has been a little hot and cold this year. He started off, on fire, and towards the last month or so of the season, I think his shooting has kind of fallen off a little bit, but he is still a critical piece. He is still the type of post presence that Nebraska really can't replace, especially with the fact that teams still, even as poorly as he's been shooting it, they still have to respect him as a shooter. So even if he's not making shots, he's still getting that spacing to the offense that really makes it all work. So his value to this team is really immeasurable with his leadership, with his production, and just kind of his steady Eddie presence in games and in practice. He's everything that you'd want kind of one of the senior pillars of this program to be about. So another big senior day send-off for Rink. And last, but certainly not least, Sam Hoiberg. There's really few comparisons I can make from a player, one, that kind of came as a walk-on that a lot of people rolled their eyes at when he came from Lincoln Pius. He's all right, coach's kid, getting a roster spot, great. This is kind of not even a feel-good story. And it's like, all right, well, whatever. But every day, I think he took that as a challenge. He said as much that a lot of the doubters and people that criticized, the whole coach's kid dynamic, he used that as motivation every day to prove those people wrong, to prove not only to the outsiders that he belonged at this level and could be a productive player in the Big Ten level, but more so to his teammates. The guys that, were scholarship players that, didn't have a parent on the staff, that might have looked at him, a little differently when he first arrived. By the time they saw how Sam worked in the weight room, on the court, in the film study, and how he just does every single thing right, it didn't take long for him to earn that respect internally. And now, this season especially, his profile and I think the appreciation of all that Sam Hoiberg is about has kind of reached a pinnacle this year, to where it's no secret all that he does and the amount of value he has to this entire program. You could make a strong case that he is the face of Nebraska basketball right now from a player perspective. Now, they've got stars like Rink and Braden and Jamarques and all those types of guys, but I'd put Sam Hoiberg right at the top of that list, if not at the top, just because of the way the fan base has gravitated toward him. And a lot of that just has to do with his daily approach. Again, he's a guy that just embodies everything that Nebraska fans want their teams to be about, where he just busts his butt every single play, every single game, every single practice. He's always smiling, signing autographs, just being a true ambassador to the state, to the program, and to the university. And, any questions about why he was here are long gone now. And now it's a situation where when he has his name called on senior day, there's not going to be very many dry eyes, and I'm very curious to see just, if his dad, who's, I think, gone out of his way to maybe tone down his praise of his kid just because of all the, optics of people saying, like maybe he's trying to hype up his kid or something like that. I wonder if those come pouring out a little bit now, where, the emotions might finally get the best of Fred in what like I said, should be a pretty emotional, pretty, I don't even know the words for it, but it's a moment, I think, that a lot of fans are really going to embrace just because of everything that Sam Hoiberg means to this team. So that's your senior day send-off. We're running along on this already, so quick run here on what Nebraska needs to do. They got dominated on the offensive boards last game in Iowa City. Iowa had 12 offensive rebounds, and they didn't score a lot in terms of second chance points. But what Iowa does is they take the air out of the basketball. They want to milk the shot clock down as much as possible on every possession. I think there's only 5 teams in college basketball that have a longer average time of possession than Iowa. So they want to just deflate the pace, turn this thing into a turtle's crawl, and make Nebraska have to play a slow-paced, half-court, methodical game and take the transition element out of Nebraska's offense. The way Nebraska can combat that is by finishing possessions on the defensive glass and turning misses into high-paced offense to allow this Nebraska to operate the way it wants to operate on the other end of the floor. They could not do that nearly enough out in Iowa City, which is why they were held to a season-low 52 points and really let Iowa dictate the tempo from start to finish. So that's priority number one, is not letting Ben McCollum play out a ideal game plan for his team to turn this thing into a rock fight and play kind of what has become this season's Iowa basketball. Next up is Bennett Sturts. He had 21 points, I can't remember, but he took almost 20 plus shots to get there. So like his efficiency wasn't great. And the thing that's really interesting about him is, there's no player in the Big Ten that has more of a workload on his shoulders than Bennett Sturts. He's averaging over 37 minutes per game, which leads the Big Ten, ranks top 10 nationally. And what's even crazier is that over like the last 10 or 12 games, he's only sat on the bench for about 5 total minutes of game time. So, he's playing all 40 minutes more often than not. And you saw in that Michigan game where, again, he scored. I think he had 21, but he took almost 20-some shots to get there. His efficiency is kind of starting to show that maybe this hefty workload that he has to carry every single game might be starting to wear on him a little bit. And if you're Nebraska, you got to make him work as hard as possible for a full 40 minutes to where when it gets to crunch time, he's playing on some tired legs. I go back to that game in Iowa City. Bennett Sturts was primarily responsible for guarding Price Sanford, and he was able to do some effective things to Price with, let's just call it physicality, off the ball to where Price really wasn't able to get open and have much free movement at all. But with that, he ran a reported 5.9 miles in trying to cover Price Sanford for an entire game. And if he has to run another 6-ish miles today after playing all of those minutes, especially coming off a really physical game where he had to do pretty much everything against Michigan last time out, this is a formula I think that Nebraska can exploit, where if you take Bennett Sturts and at least get him down to, playing on some fumes where, it's taken a lot of shots to get his production, then all of a sudden, that's fallen into Nebraska's game plan, where Iowa suddenly starts to panic because 90% of their offense is Bennett Sturts. And if he's struggling, then the Hawkeyes are going to struggle. And then last but not least, play off the emotions of this one. It's not just about senior day, which is significant, but it's also about all the stuff that happened in Iowa City with the Price Sanford chanting, where they chanted F Price Sanford more than they said let's go Hawks, where they stormed the court, got in Fred's face and said, how do you like that? And he slapped the phone out of a kid's hand and had to basically talk about it for the next 3 days because it became a national story. So there's a lot that Nebraska hasn't forgotten about that game in Carver Hawkeye, and I hope that fuels them in this one, to where it's not just like inspiring them and giving them motivation, but they're able to channel that emotion into, really giving them that extra gear where they're playing their best basketball and doing so with a lot of intent to exact some revenge. I'm going to sign off right now. Hard to think with the cheerleaders going through the routine right now, but tune in after the game. Post-game analysis on what is our final game here at Pinnacle Bank Arena for Senior Day, Nebraska, Iowa. Thanks to our sponsors, Group Therapy Bike Tours, Slim Chickens Restaurants, and we'll see you after the game.